Well, hello everyone. Here to show you that the cure for sting coloring activity right here is this coloring basically talks about is like if most of us have experience, which it calls like what it's like to be stung, by a bee. It is if it's a bumblebee or if it's a wasp or anything like that. Of knowing about that if you were to be working out, you say a lot of times taking out the trash or anything like that, using your hands quite often it is, and knowing about it's like you say working with your hands it is, and if you were to find a bee somewhere, or if it's a wasp, or you say blackjack, you say any type of honeybee it is, that more likely that if most of us have experienced, what it's like to be stung by a bee. And of course, this kind of reminds me of a story that, there's a couple of years ago I would be walking, of course, in the backyard, over there where I used to live, those couple of years ago of walking around with my flip-flops, and I would step on a bee, it was, and then the bee would sting me. And I can remember that a couple times got stung by a bee, and from what I remember that my parents, it's like that talked about that they would go ahead and put cover the wound up with mud. A lot of times it was mud. Any type of dirt particles that you would find inside the yard it was, and on the ground. And I guess a lot of times with mud though that. With mud that it would I guess a lot of times it was cold, and of course it would prevent infection a lot of times. If I can remember, each time I would get stung by a bee, of course my mom, like it would be like she would go ahead and cover it up with mud. It was just to per se prevent infection. And on the other hand too, that with most of the time though that the best of first aid kits, of course, you can buy if you were stung by a bee, for any particular say purpose it is of knowing about the types of things, of course, that you need to know, of course, to be stung by a bee. And like with anybody probably think about, really that is it all a fact about that if the Band-Aid, more likely a Band-Aid will not make the pain go away, and a lot of times that something like maybe ice pack. An ice pack I think would probably cause too much tension, of course, you say on the wound it is, because this right here will be an example right here of what I have drawn, of course, for like an example right here of a sting. And a lot of times that I keep thinking about whenever if a bee were to if the bee were to sting you, then a lot of times the stinger would go into I guess it would pierce through the skin, and then come back out it is, or something like that. There was I guess it would be some type of formula inside the part, of course, of the bee, to where if you would get stung by a bee it is, then it would there would be some type of formula to I guess they say a lot of times it's not poisonous. I guess I don't know. Anybody probably think about that. I guess I don't know if any type of a poisonous bee or wasp. I think there's a few poisonous wasps, but I guess a lot of times they say that a lot of times like a normal sweat bee, it is that it just it hurts, but on the other hand too, not poisonous. But it's like talk about is harmless. But on the other hand too, that I could tell anybody here, besides the feeling of having getting a shot it is. And I can remember that my medical doctor, of course, told me this, that when they were back in I think it was back in 1998, 1999 it was, that whenever I was getting surgery done, and I can remember that he was explaining to me about what they were going to do before they proceed to say what the surgery was. And like with anybody here, if they've had surgery before, and that they put the IV inside you, and with the IV, and then they asked me, I'm like, do you know how we're going to go ahead and proceed, of course, with this operation? And I told him, yeah. I was like, oh yeah? Well, how? Well, you're going to go ahead and dress me up in a gown, and of course give me medicine, and of course it's like, and tell me whenever you get ready to do the surgery. And I can tell anybody here that I thought that maybe that they were going to let me listen to music while they're doing the surgery, or something like that, but they said nope. We're going to go ahead and put you to sleep, and then we're going to go ahead and give you an antibiotic to make you rest, during the surgery, and then whenever you wake up, it's like all be done. It is. And I can remember that he said that whenever they give you the IV, whenever they put the IV into you, that they say that because they numb you all the time, the part where they put the IV in, and they said that, have you ever been stung by a bee before? Like, yeah. Like, well, it basically feels like a bee sting. Whenever we put the IV in you, it feels like a bee sting, and I could tell anybody here that I guess that all depends, because on the other hand too, that with most bee stings, that if most of us have gotten maybe stung, it's like had maybe a thorn, maybe gotten poked by a thorn, maybe anybody probably think about like maybe a cactus or something like that, thorns off of a cactus or something like that. If you call maybe that, feel like maybe a little bit of a bee sting. But on the other hand, the best of ways of how to cure, of course, is a bee sting. And a lot of times I usually use mud. It is that's how my mom, of course, she treated it, was if I were to get stung by a bee for any reason. And I can remember that back those couple of years ago, even at the St. Louis Zoo, it was that I can remember that talking to somebody there about that my mom was trying to get rid of a nest of bees, of course, in one of the bags. Apparently that there was some bags, of course, in the front yard to where that we would apparently that the bees had built a nest somewhere in there, and then they inside the bags, I think it was something about loose grass or something like that was raked up, or any type of loose weeds or something like that we had gathered in the bags, in the front yard it was. And they were there for about maybe 3 or 4 weeks, but the bees apparently had gotten in there and built a nest in there. And I don't know, anybody maybe thinking about that, maybe why would the bees build their nest in some odd locations, such as, maybe next to the gutter. I'm like, anybody maybe thinking about, the places where maybe bees may put a nest, and, maybe a honey hive. I'm like, yeah, that talking about the kind of bees that, produce honey. And anybody may be thinking about that, honey may be sweet, but on the other hand too, the bee ain't. But on the other hand too, that with most bees, that whenever they land on the flower, and I might tell anybody here, I'm like, yeah, that talking about, give an example right here, I'd say of a sunflower. A lot of times that would have pollen on it. It's like right here's a sunflower, and right here, you got right here, it's like the sunflower. It is if they had like purple petals or something like that, and it would collect the honey a lot of times from the flower, and from there, and then take it, I guess, to the hive. And a lot of times, anybody may be thinking about, yeah, the times I've been in school, I never really studied about how they produce the honey. I'm thinking that more likely that it's stirred. I guess that they stir it with their special claw, with their little legs, or something like that. Inside the hives, they stir it until it gets thick, and I'm like, yeah, the things that, of course, that we think nowadays, that like for how they make honey. Knowing about, maybe like cake mix. It's like if you had to add, maybe a little bit of milk, and of course a little bit of cinnamon, sugar or something like that. But on the other hand too, that talk about reminds me of one of those video games. But like talk about, it's like, yeah, it's like go visit a honey hive, and it's like talk about, show her the honey, the honey bees, of course, inside the honey hive it is. But anyway. But the best of ways, of course, of how to cure a bee sting, more likely, anybody may wonder about that. And I think about, either mud, or if there could be like some type of formula to where a lot of times they say that, that usually though, that if it's a sweat bee, then a lot of times that, there ain't no ointment required, of course, that a lot of times that they say that the pain will go away, after, a couple of hours it was. And I can remember whenever I got stung by a sweat bee, that I can remember that, hey, I'm like, that, it hurt. And on the other hand, too, that knowing about that, the pain lasted for, I would say, at least 8 hours. If I can remember right, 8 hours, a lot of times is how long it lasts for. Like with anybody, you probably think about if let's just say if you were allergic to the sting a lot of times, and then maybe you had the need to have, any type of medical treatment, it is. But the way I would think about it, though, that with being outside, in the outdoors, it is if you're going to have like maybe if it's a bee or if it's a wasp or blackjack, whichever it is, any type of anything that more likely that stings, anything that bites. On the other hand, too, that more likely talking about is that if any type of situation like that is know about, of course, about what to do, of course, in case that situation it is, and knowing about anybody maybe thinking about that it's harmless, but on the other hand, too, that depending on if that person could be allergic to whichever that what they were bitten by it was, and knowing about that could maybe lead to some anything related to say symptoms such as hard breathing or anything like that, or swelling, severe swelling, of course, inside the arms it is, something like that, but inside the wrist, for where the sting took place. And anybody maybe wonder about how does a bee sting a lot of times occur? I always thought about it is that if you had, like, say, the stinger right here, that the stinger would more likely go and say inside of for wherever that they stung you by, it would go in and it would come out. There would be some type of formula inside of the stinger to where if you did get stung, then a lot of times there would be formula, of course, inside the sting to where it's like anybody probably thinking about get released. It's like if anybody of us any of us have seen the Bee movie yet, but anyway. But other than that, though, I don't know. I could probably say that I've been stung by a bee before, but can I really explain, of course, about knowing about that? Yeah, that how do they sting, and of course, what's the reason to maybe why they sting? It is, and a couple of times too that I walked around in the yard over there at the where I used to live, and then I remember a lot of times be walking and I would wind up stepping on the bee and I could just feel the bee sting. It was, and that sting, of course, I'm like, you're talking about it hurt. I'm like, we're not talking about our normal mosquito bite, or we're not talking about just a little scratch. I'm like, we're talking about the feeling to where that somebody is holding a flame, of course, right up, it's like, talking about, hot metal being pierced into your fingernail, hot metal being pierced into your finger. That's kind of like how the feeling of it. And anybody maybe think about, maybe that they have other feelings too about, like, well, what's it like to get a bee sting? But on the other hand, that they say a lot of times with like medical needles, that with medical needles, it is, I can draw an example here real quick about with a medical needle, that a lot of times with the medical needles that have it to, say, in the medical lab, but a lot of times with the medical needles, like we say with an IV, that they say that it goes I would say it goes about that far, of course, inside the skin it is. And knowing about that whenever they first put it in you, that more likely they say that it feels like a pinch, like somebody's pinching you. It just feels like a pinch at first, but then of course if you have sensitive skin, then more likely it'll probably hurt a lot more than that. But on the other hand too, that knowing about, we say with what I can really talk about, of course, about the cure for sting, it is that I could probably say that for any type of first aid solution, usually is more likely if they're going to have anything in the stores. I'm sure that for like bee stings, such as first aid spray. A lot of times if they for any type of burns or it's like that, if they have like first aid spray, it is, or any type of bandages or band-aids with the type of formula to reduce the pain. It's like take the for the type of ointment, the type of cream for like taking the itch away, relieving the itch, and of course relieving the pain it is. And I'm sure that more likely nowadays that they have at least something. Of course that you may have to get behind the counter, over the counter it is, but usually I use mud, of course. I know that's my parents, my mom, of course, she a lot of times use mud a lot of times to it's like if I were to get stung by a bee, then a lot of times it's like hold mud up to it, to prevent the swelling it is. And And I can remember that one time I got stung by a bee. I can remember I was telling somebody over there at the St. Louis Zoo actually about the story it was, and I'm like that. Yeah, that there was a bee nest that was over there. There was a bee nest in one of the bags, of course, from the lawn work from the other day, and then I wound up getting stung by a bee. It was. I wound up getting stung by a bee, and if I can remember right, yeah, there was a teacher. One of the teachers in my classroom those couple of years ago, I think that was back in 1996 it was, that had gotten stung by a bee one time. That there was a student that was swiping the bee around, and what happened was that made the bee mad, and then so he, the bee attacked him, because he said that, I think, the bee may have landed, of course, on his desk, and I think that he said he got stung by a bee on his elbow or something like that, and then wind up that I think he wound up going to the nurse as well. It was at the elementary school, but it was like, yeah, that anybody probably think about it, that if you were to get stung by a bee, especially on the playground, during recess time, that a lot of times it's like, yeah, that be stung by a bee and knowing about, yeah, well, go to the nurse's office, just to have them put ointment on, put cream on it, but a lot of times too that with anybody, if they experienced, of course, about between a bee sting and then of course with any other type of sting it is, of knowing about that the things, of course, that I a lot of times did that if I wind up if I wind up cutting my hand, or if I by accident if I if there's a point to where maybe I start bleeding over something, whichever it is, got stung by a bee, knowing about anybody maybe thinking about that, a couple times they asked me, how come you didn't say anything? We could have sent you to the nurse. It is, in a lot of ways I could tell anybody here, that's okay, forget it. I'm like, I don't want you to kiss it, I just want you to leave it alone. I'm just here to do my work, and don't worry about it, because and I could tell anybody here that I know a few people, of course, that are pretty concerned about if I do fall down, or if I wind up cut my finger on something, whichever it is, getting stung by something, and the next thing you know, it's like, yeah, that how come you didn't say anything? Well, I'm like that. Like the other day, I'm like, yeah, if I was maybe at work or doing something, and it's like, don't say anything, I'm like, that really, that the type of attention more likely that you people usually get. It's like, I would think I would take any attention I can get. It's like, really, besides whenever you call and if you were sick or something like that, I've known about that if you were bleeding for any reason, and people are like, oh, are you okay? Oh, do you need a Band-Aid? Oh, hey, you're bleeding. I can, oh, well, I tell you, yeah, well, what are you going to do about it? Do you want me to kiss it to make it feel better? No, I don't want you to kiss it. More likely, I think more, if anything, you can keep an eye on it, though. But other than that, talk right here. Can I see, can I see that sting of yours, I say, on your wrist or anything like that? But I could tell anybody here that any type of scars, of course, that may have gotten, recently it was, so far as, for dry skin or anything like that, and talking about anybody may think about that, for dry skin or anything like that, of knowing about, hey, I can, do you want me to kiss it to make it feel better? It is, but... And then I could tell anybody here too that talk about, it's like with warts, of course, that I had warts on my hands a couple of times because I used to pick up frogs. It was with say my hand, but a lot of times I was scared of bees. It was, but I had to talk up, say, for the cure for sting, coloring activity right here is basically talk about the course of ways of how to prevent, of course, you say from swelling. It is in a lot of ways, though, that I could probably say about it. I would suggest to anybody is to pay attention to, if you do get stung by a bee, is to at least let somebody know. And of course, it's like, yeah, because knowing about if it starts getting swell or anything like that, and a lot of people may think of you as like, you cry, baby, you want people to feel sorry for you just because you were stung by a bee or you were stung by a wasp. It is, but on the other hand too, that if there's a situation to where if it did get infected, like if anybody has experience maybe getting their ears pierced, it is, or their nose pierced or tongue pierced, it is, you may think that it's quite normal, to feel like something like a bee sting, it is. But on the other hand too, if it does get infected, then more likely they say it's a good chance you would probably need to see a doctor, it is, for that particular reason, it is. But on the other hand too, to know about besides like with the swelling, it is you have right here is the details, of course, for the cure for the sting coloring activity right here. Talk I say with the bee sting, and so far as say with the coloring activity.